Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be speaking about all the books I've read from the last few months, so that's May until July. I have been reading so much recently. I think because it's been a really stressful time, the actual amount that I've been reading has just gone through the roof. But yeah, just wanted to have a chat with you guys about what I've been reading recently, what I've liked, what I've discovered, and all of that kind of stuff. I will say that the lighting is pretty awkward in this video. There's a slither of light that's just I'm trying to avoid. I can't be bothered resetting up the camera, so we're just going to deal with it. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump into it, and I'm going to be speaking with you about the books I've read between May and July of this year. The first two books I'm going to be speaking about today, I didn't actually read back to back. I read the first one and then a month and a bit later read the second one, but for the sake of easiness, I'm just going to chuck them together here. And that is Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I really enjoyed this book series. I thought it was brilliant. I really liked the characters overall. I just thought it was a really good, strong story. And I will start out by saying I'm an absolute idiot and I accidentally spoiled the ending of the last book for myself because I googled one of the characters and I got the spoiler, the quintessential spoiler for this book. So that was kind of upsetting for me because I wish I hadn't have known about it. But anyway, the first book is called Six of Crows and it is about these six main characters. Essentially, this is a fantasy heist story. So it has the sort of plot archetype of the heist story set in a fantasy world. And it's not a high fantasy. There's only really one character, just trying to remember it correctly, there's only really one character that can use magic in this, and it's not a lot of magic compared to some other stories. And sort of the main character of this story, there are six perspectives, but the main character, in my opinion, I think he's the main character, is Kaz Brecker. He is a very young gang leader. He's not technically the leader of this gang they're in, but he's kind of the leader. And he is wanting to organize this particular heist for a number of reasons. My big criticism with this book, this was the thing that kept sticking out to me and kind of annoying me a little bit with it, was the fact that the characters were so young, but they didn't act as if they were young. I understand that this is a YA fantasy story, and I understand that that's the target audience and the target market, but I feel if they had have just aged up the characters by 4 or 5 years, it would have been a bit stronger and it would have made it a little bit more convincing. That being said, I love the characterization in this book. I thought the characters were really interesting and I really cared about the backstories of every single character. I just really enjoyed the story. I thought it was very fun and very much enjoyed it. Again, I wish I hadn't have spoiled the ending for myself, but otherwise I thought it was a really fun story and I quite enjoyed both of those books. The next one I read is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This book is very large, and I know that this is something that people comment on whenever they see this book. Sorry, this other book is blinding me. And this is something that gets brought up every single time people talk about this book, is that it is just massive. The reason that it's massive is because this book is an epic fantasy, and that is pretty common within the genre. If you're going to have an epic fantasy book, it's going to be really large. It's sort of difficult to summarize the plot really concisely, but there are 4 main point of view characters in this story. Ede, Loth, Nicolaes, and Tanae. Those are the 4 main characters. It goes between their perspectives. Pretty much the story kind of kicks off with Ede. She's living in this castle with a queen. She's a lady in waiting for the queen. But Ede is from a foreign place and she's pretending to not be a sorceress because she's protecting Sabran, the queen of this particular little realm. What you need to know is that it's based on the tale of George and the Dragon, and there are a lot of dragons in this story, which made me infinitely happy. God, I love anything with dragons in it. But one of the really beautiful and interesting things this book did was it contrasted the sort of folklore and mythology of dragons in the West with that of the East. So in the sort of Western land in this story, the dragons are really associated with fire and our very traditional archetypes of what dragons are supposed to be. whereas in the more eastern land, the dragons were more associated with water and they were a lot more peaceful creatures. And I really loved how it contrasted two different types of folklore and mythology there. The world building in this book is just astounding. We went to so many different places in this story, like deserty places, pirate ship places, East Asian inspired dragony places. There were so many different beautifully crafted settings in this book, and I just thought it was brilliant. The next book I read was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I've spoken about this book a bunch of times on my channel. This was a reread for me and I listened to the audiobook. For those of you who don't know, Coraline is a middle grade story about a young girl who's living in this house. She goes through a door which wasn't meant to have anything behind it and discovers this sort of like alternate world where she has her other mother. The other mother has buttons for eyes. It's very like creepy and dark and like a beautiful little gothic story, which I love dearly. It was very much a comfort reread for me and I really loved listening to it again. Okay, it's getting like furiously warm in here, so I'm just gonna put on the air conditioner. This is the thing about this apartment, and God, I know I whinge about it in like every video, but because there's so many windows, it gets so warm in here. It is the middle of winter and I'm in a t-shirt. We haven't used our heater once this winter because this apartment is just so warm, which sounds like a good thing, but when it's the middle of the day, it gets very toasty in here. Okay, the next book is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I read this on audiobook and I was blown away by how much I loved this novel. This book won the 2019, I think, Man Booker Prize, in addition to Margaret Atwood winning for The Testaments. So it's told from 12 different perspectives and you start with one particular perspective and then you go to the next one and then like you weave back and you come back to these key characters, and all of the characters are linked in some way through family or marriage or like experiences, or they're all going to see this one play. It's amazingly interwoven. Pretty much this book is like 12 in-depth character studies that look at the lives of these people living in the UK. Mostly it's Black British women. There is a person in here who's non-binary. There's a lot of different experiences here within these characters and I just loved this story so much. Yeah, it's intergenerational, it's about family relationships, it's about like our place in society. It weaves back and forth through time as we go through these different stories. It was just an amazing and interesting book and it was so enthralling to listen to. Very obvious why it won the Man Booker last year. Overall, yeah, I just really loved this story and I thought it was amazing. The next one was Howl's Moving Castle. This is another reread for me. I reread this book so often. It is such a comfort read for me. For those of you who haven't seen me talk about this book a million zillion times on this channel so far, I love Howl's Moving Castle. Howl's Moving Castle is my favorite Ghibli film. There's something about this story that I just adore so incredibly much. What I especially love about the book is that the characters feel so real. Like, I love Hal's character in this story. He's so sassy and narcissistic and flamboyant, and I love it. And the way he and Sophie bicker is like my favorite thing in the world. So I go back and I reread this book all the time. But if you don't know the plot, this book is pretty much about a young girl named Sophie. She is the eldest of three. In the movie she's the eldest of two, but in this book she's the eldest of three sisters, which means that she's sort of like doomed to be unlucky. When she accidentally upsets the Wicked Witch of the Waste turns her into an old woman, and then Sophie has to go off and try and work out how to break the spell that's on her. She stumbles onto this wizard and his moving castle. The wizard has a reputation for breaking young women's hearts. Yeah, it's a brilliant story and I love it, and it's so whimsical and happy and just overall very good. The next book I read was So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Olu. This was also one I read on audiobook. This book is pretty much everything it says on the tin. It's a book that talks about race and people's experience of racism and how we should be talking about race if we're people who want to actively change things and to be better and to help people who experience the adversities of racism. It's a book that's written for people who have made up their minds that they want to actively be better, and it's a book that's designed to educate people. It's very entry level. I think that was done on purpose to make sure that like anyone who's never read anything to do with race or ethnocentrism or culture like this could just pick it up and not be alienated by it. So I thought that was brilliant. I think that was really, really good, and I think the author absolutely achieved what they were setting out to do. So yeah, a really good, accessible book that speaks about racism. I really appreciated the chapter on intersectionality. I thought it was quite informative and it really laid everything out very clearly. Yeah, this is a brilliant short book to read if you want to start learning about racial inequality or how to speak about these types of things, how to help, how to be better, all of that kind of stuff. This is a brilliant book. The next book I read is Miyazaki World, A Life in Art. This is by Susan Napier. Susan Napier is a professor in like Japanese culture in the US, and pretty much she wrote a biography on Hayao Miyazaki's life, and particularly she wrote this biography in the context of comparing things to his films. So it starts off with like the first little bit about his life, and then the rest of it is like sort of structured in terms of his major works, which I really appreciated. I loved the sort of like deep dive that the author did into his different films. I've watched all of Miyazaki's films aside from Porco Rosso. I haven't watched that one yet. But I really appreciated like how in-depth the author went. That being said, I'm like super nosy and I would have wanted to know more about like his personal life and stuff like that. Like where his influences came from, how he decided to make which film, blah, 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 blah. I think the author went as in-depth as she could. He seems like a reasonably private person, so it makes sense if he doesn't want that information to be out and found by people. There was a lot in this book about his childhood and about his mother and father and all this kind of stuff, but there wasn't nearly as much on his family, like how having a family has impacted his career. Like there were little snippets, there were little bits, but I would have personally, if I'm being really, really picky, I would have liked it to like go more in depth into that sort of area of his life. And also I think the author really, really wanted to just analyze this from the perspective of how his life fit in and around his films. The focus of this autobiography was his films. The next book I listened to, I don't even know if it's technically classed as a book, because this one, it was an audio book, but technically it was a BBC dramatization, so I don't know if this is a book, but we're just going to throw this on this list anyway. And it was the BBC dramatization of Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman. I thought this was going to be the actual book, and then I got into it and it was only like an hour and a half long or something. But regardless, I thought it was amazing. I really enjoyed listening to it. The production quality was so high on this audiobook, again because it was a dramatization done by the BBC. There were lots of different like voice actors for the characters. I spent like the whole time being like, I recognize Loki's voice, I recognize it, where is it from? And then afterwards I googled it and it was Merlin from the TV show Merlin, so that's why I recognized it. But yeah, this audiobook is based on the book Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, and it pretty much covers a few of the key like Norse myths. So Loki and Thor and Mjolnir the hammer and like all of this stuff. And then the very last book I read in the last few months is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Oh my god. If you're following me on Instagram, then you would already have a bit of an inkling on what my feelings are about this book. I loved it. I cried like 3 or 4 separate times while reading this story. And if you've been here for a while, then you'll know that if I cry during a book, then that means it's a 5-star book because it means it made me feel something. I loved this book. I really, really enjoyed this book. This is a really difficult book to like concisely summarize, but I'm going to do my best anyway. It starts off in Yeongdo in Korea, which is an island near Busan or in Busan. I don't know which one it is. And this young girl, actually no, when it's in 1911, it starts off with her parents, but eventually we meet the main character. Her name is Sunja, and she is about 16, and she gets pregnant to a man who's a bit older than her, quite a bit older than her, and it says on the back, so I don't think it's a spoiler, he's a part of the Yakuza in Japan, and because of the time period and where it is, she's in like a really, really bad situation being young, not married and pregnant. And a Christian minister named Isaac, he offers to marry her and save her effectively, but he takes her with him to Japan, where he is like on his way to go work at a church in Osaka. to live with his brother. So yeah, Sunja is 16, pregnant, and now married to a different man on her way to Japan. And like the further historical context here is that this is during a time when Korea was still being occupied by Japan before the Second World War. So Sunja, being Korean, goes and lives in Japan, but this is a time where it was really, really hostile for Koreans to live in Japan. There were a lot of very bad things that happened to Korean people. I didn't know anything about this period in history before I read this book. Like, I knew a very, very small amount. I knew a little bit about the Japanese occupation of Korea. But yeah, I learned so much from reading this book about the experiences of these people. And this book is just gut-wrenching and beautiful, and the imagery is beautiful. The way it's written is so stunning. I just loved every single part of this book. I thought it was amazing. It's so clear that the author did a lot of research when she was writing this book. I think the other thing that makes this book incredibly strong is how it, because it goes from 1911 and travels through time quite a bit, because it follows the lives of these characters, and I think the way it shows the shift in culture, the shift in behavior, and also the shift in like technology is very interesting. Yep, it's probably my favorite book I've read so far this year. I think it was brilliant, and I absolutely recommend it to anyone who wants to read it. And yeah, those were all of the books I finished between July and, no, that's wrong. All the books I finished between May and July of this year. A lot of you would have seen me reading The Starless Sea in my You Don't Have to Be Productive Right Now video. I haven't finished that book. Unfortunately, I started it and then I got distracted, and I had to give it back to the library because it was in like hot demand. So I didn't have very long with it. So as soon as I can borrow that back from the library and read more of it, I'll tell you guys what I felt about it. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Please let me know what you guys have been reading at the moment, what books you've been enjoying. Have you been reading more at this time? I feel like the more stressful the world gets, the more I read, and I keep saying that, but it seems abundantly true to me at the moment. So let me know how you guys are going with your reading. And yeah, take care guys. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.